We celebrate our independence on the 4th of July, but technically, America declared her independence 2 days earlier, and Jefferson's document, the Declaration of Independence, wasn't signed until August 2nd. So July 4th as Independence Day is just one of the mistakes that we, all Americans, have lived with. And there are others that are right now, they're downright lies. And joining us to talk it out and sort it out is David Barton. He's the author of a new book, The Jefferson Lies. And David, welcome back to the 700 Club.
Good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Let's jump right into it, because this is one that, until I read your book, I'd actually bought into, that Jefferson had a mistress who was a slave, Sally Hemings, and I thought that there was some DNA evidence that supported the assertion that his DNA was found in her descendants.
There's a good reason to believe that, because you had 221 news outlets that reported that. Nature and Science magazine in November of '98 announced that DNA proves that Jefferson fathered children South. 221 news outlets do it. What happened was 8 weeks later, they retracted the story. Said, oops, sorry about that. DNA didn't prove that. Only 11 news outlets carried the retraction. So everybody thinks it happened. It didn't happen. We actually talked to the guy who did the DNA testing. He repeated it the second time, Eugene Foster, and didn't prove that. As a matter of fact, the problem with even the concept that Jefferson's proved is, since Jefferson's not here to test his DNA, you have to test his male descendants.
Right.
Jefferson had no male descendants. His young son died at a couple months old. There's absolutely no way to even test Jefferson's DNA. So to conclusively announce that he did it, but it was critical at the time, because the guy who made the announcement, Pulitzer Prize-winning historian, had just come out in the New York Times saying, oh, Clinton shouldn't be impeached. This is the, and so they used the Jefferson thing to help say, hey, if Jefferson did this kind of stuff, we shouldn't be impeaching the president. And then after
so
that,
William
they pulled
Jefferson
it back.
Clinton?
That's right. Yeah.
wouldn't get tagged. So it was politically motivated.
It was it sure appears to be that way. I don't know the heart of the guy, but based on what he had done, what he said, and what the guys who wrote the article said, that this was going to help the president in his impeachment proceedings, it would sure appear to be politically motivated. But it absolutely was not true that DNA proved that Jefferson had.
But why does it continue to circulate? Why? Because even after the big press run, I still see that.
Yes.
That he, he's hypocritical for saying all men are created equal, and he's a slave owner, and not just any slave owner, a really bad one who's forcing slaves to have sex with them.
Yeah. A lot of that goes back to a whole academic viewpoint of deconstructionism. There's a couple of professors who hate this book, and they've got a book written to rebut it. And they start out right up front saying, hey, you think American exceptionalism is a good thing. It's not. American exceptionalism is terrible. That tells you the philosophy. They don't like America as that position. And Jefferson's 6 of the ideas he put in the Declaration are the basis of every idea in the Constitution. That produces American exceptionalism. Right. So if you're going to tear American exceptionalism down, you got to tear the guy who founded it down. And so you go after Jefferson, you go after other founders who gave us key ideas that all men are created equal, that we're endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights, that government exists to protect those rights. If you don't like American exceptionalism, you got to take him out, and that's really the target of academics.
Before we get into that, and I do want to get into that, let's deal with two of the other major lies. The second one is that Jefferson was, at best, a deist, probably some kind of closet atheist, didn't believe in the divinity of Christ, those kinds of things. What have you found on that?
Exactly the opposite. Jefferson actually had phases of Christianity in his life. Early years, he's exactly orthodox. The speech he gave in 1776, the floor of the House of Burgesses, called Notes on Religion. I mean, orthodox Christianity down the line. Later in life, when his wife died, that was a real trying time for him. He questioned his faith, but he came back to it. It's only in about his last 15 years that he starts writing things that are a lot questionable, quite frankly. But that was Charlottesville at the time. A whole movement came in called Christian primitivism. He bought into it, and they said, you know what, the word Trinity doesn't appear in the Bible. We shouldn't be using it. And so he said, well, it doesn't appear, maybe. And so that's where you find some, but for the first 75 years of his life, or 70 years, there's no questions there. And what happens is historians today, academics today, take those last 12, 15 years, lift a few quotes out of that and say, this is Jefferson's belief, this whole nonsense. Even in the last life, he was not a deist and he was not an atheist.
Yeah, and they've used that to support the whole, his letter to the Danbury Baptists about the separation of church and state, that somehow because he was a deist or an atheist, he was trying to create an entirely secular society and move away from Christianity And there's another lie related to that, that he created his own Bible that left out all the miracles and all the supernatural and just viewed Jesus as a philosopher. Tell us about that one.
I bought into that one because that's what I've been taught. And at Easter time, a great lady who is a national news commentator, religion editor, did a piece at Easter and said, you know, Easter's a great time for we who are Christians, but Jefferson would have hated the day because he didn't believe in Jesus as the Savior divine. He wrote his own Bible. And so that's the thing that's out there with Christians, and I bought that. And as I did the research, I found out, well, wait a minute, there's not one Jefferson Bible, there's two. There's 1804 and 1820. And then as you read both of them, you go, they're full of all sorts of divine stuff that I was told wasn't there. So as I get Christians today who say, oh, but what about Jefferson's Bible? I love saying, which one are you talking about? And if they don't know there's two, then I know they don't know what they're talking about. And I ask them, have you ever read either one? No, I never have. Well, then how do you know it took the miracles out? Well, everybody says so. But you read that 1804, and it's got Jesus raising the dead, casting out demons, healing the sick, Jesus the Son of God, Jesus the second coming. You know, that sounds pretty divine and pretty miraculous to me, you know, but we've always been told, no, he cut all that stuff out.
And then when you look at his life and his actual behavior, I mean, he was a loyal member of the local Anglican church in Charlottesville. He contributed to the construction of the church. He contributed to the minister's salary.
He contributed to construction of a bunch of other churches as well. I mean, he helped fund other churches. He was big into building churches.
And he was encouraging evangelization.
He was.
That we should send missionaries, the early colonies should send missionaries to the Indians.
He actually used federal funds. One of the treaties he signed.
Oh, really?
A treaty he signed in 1803 gave several $100s for the payment of Catholic missionaries to the Kaskaskia Indians, and also so they built a church in which they could worship after they're converted. So that's federal funds he's using to do that. 3 other times he signed acts giving missionary lands to the Indians for Christian use. So, I mean, he did a lot with that.
What's the end game here? Because I think the lies have been repeated so often, and it's the, you know, you repeat something often enough, it suddenly transforms into the truth. What are people, and why is the academic community now seemingly so bent on trying to change this?
They love Jefferson because he's the only guy that has some phrases you can take completely out of context and make them seem opposite of what. It's hard to do that with Washington or John Adams or anybody else, but you can do that with Jefferson. Separation of church and state, you take it out of context, you can make a secular society. So they love him because they have some phrases, but also he's the key guy for our ideas. I mean, Michael Newdow, the atheist, he sues to take under God out of the pledge. If he walks in the courtroom and says, I don't want under God in the pledge, we all say, live with it. 90% of us do. Welcome to free speech in America. He walks in and says, Thomas Jefferson doesn't want under God in the pledge. And we all kind of back up and say, no, wait a minute. I really respect the Constitution, the founders. I love the country. I guess if the founders didn't want this, I'm going to have to live with it. And so what happens is people take their agendas and wrap Jefferson around their secular agendas, their moral agendas. Jefferson would repudiate, and did repudiate, and that's what we show in the book, is he didn't believe that stuff, but we use him today to try to advance agendas that he opposed and fought his entire life.
Why don't we advance the idea that he used federal funds to send
Exactly. We can't even get faith-based programs, and he's doing direct funding.
You know, in the introduction to the book, it was pointed out that currently there's a shelter helping women transition out of jail, receiving federal funds, and the federal government is telling them no more Bible.
Yeah.
It's a Christian organization.
It's a Christian organization.
Most of their funding comes from donations, but because the federal government has done this, I just find it incredible what's going on in the culture. Get informed. The book is called The Jefferson Lies, Exposing the Myths You've Always Believed. I think particularly today, with the debate going on literally for the soul of America, let's get informed. And so get David's book. It's called Jefferson Lies. It's available nationwide. Thank you. Thank you for the book.
Good to be here, brother.